In the United Arab Emirates, the world's 115th largest country with a population of about 9.5 million, 80% of whom are foreigners, infrastructure projects worth tens of billions of dollars are simultaneously underway. One of the most ambitious construction projects in the world is being built in the middle of the desert. The Gulf Cooperation Council, which includes 6 of the Middle East's richest countries, is building a railroad over 2,000 kilometers long to better connect the region. With desert sands to cross and mountains to tunnel through, the challenges of the project are enormous and comparable only to the cost involved. The railroad has the potential to unite the Gulf countries, change its transport sector, reduce carbon emissions, and begin a new era of economic development. But first it must overcome the political, financial and logistical challenges standing in its way. Before we get into how the railroad is built, it is important to understand why it is being built in the first place. Let's start with February 1981 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Leaders from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman met to form a political and economic alliance called the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC. As a group, they made a lot of money from oil and gas. This means that their economies are largely tied to the oil market. Around 2008-2009, oil prices plummeted amid the Great Recession, and the Gulf economies suffered. That's where the railroads come into play. In 2009, the GCC approved a massive rail project that would connect all 6 member countries. The costs will be shared among the countries, and the entire project is estimated at $100 billion to $250 billion. Diversifying Gulf economies away from oil and gas will help them develop stronger economies, said Colorado School of Mines professor Hussein Ayamari. Rail lines would help, for example, connect the country's ports to manufacturing centers, which would connect the country's ports to urban centers. A key element of the network is the Etihad Railroad, a 200-kilometer, $11 billion freight and passenger railroad stretching across the Emirates from the Gulf of Oman to the Persian Gulf. The UAE's first national rail network is being built in 2 phases. The first phase was completed in 2016 and covers 264 kilometers from the Hakshan and Shah areas of Abu Dhabi to the port of Ruwais. It's a tough working environment, to say the least. It can get so hot in the summer that some construction sites work at night, when temperatures approach 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Sand is suitable for difficult terrain. Etihad has learned from other builders in the desert, including China, Saudi Arabia and Mauritania. These countries have found solutions, such as turning sand dunes into clay over the years, watching for moving dunes, and installing walls of vegetation to block wind and sand. The design of the Etihad rail locomotive includes a sand filtration system and a sand plow to help mitigate sand-related problems. In Phase 1, Etihad Rail built 20 overpasses, 2 underpasses, 10 underpasses and 18 smaller underpasses for future use. The company also built 2 plants to produce reinforced concrete sleepers from local raw materials, which form the basis of the railroad tracks. Each sleeper is 2.6 meters long and weighs 340 kilograms. They are attached to the main rails with a fastening system, and are used to stabilize the track and ensure smooth train travel at speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour for passenger trains. But this first route does not yet serve passengers. On the contrary, it transports up to 22,000 tons of granulated sulfur in 110 railcars every day. The element is extracted from oil fields in Abu Dhabi and processed for export at the port of Ruwais, where it is used to produce everything from batteries to fertilizers to fireworks. As of mid-2021, Etihad Rail had transported more than 30 million tons of granular sulfur for the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Etihad claims that a single train ride reduces carbon dioxide emissions by 70 to 80% compared to a truck ride. This is important for an economy with one of the highest carbon emissions in the world. This efficiency has also helped Emirates become the world's largest exporter of sulfur, bringing in $699 million in 2019. Most of this sulfur probably went to China, the world's largest importer of this element, which is also involved in the second phase of production. The opening of the new trunk line allowed the UAE to become the world's leading producer of granular sulfur, a byproduct produced in gas purification, and the main ingredient in fertilizer production. It is an unstable material that, if not of sufficient quality, and in certain concentrations, can ignite when interacting with atmospheric air. So one of the main reasons for choosing rail transport as the carrier for Abu Dhabi Oil was its high reliability. The current schedule accuracy is 91.5%. Nevertheless, given the specific nature of the environment and its negative impact on rail infrastructure, Etihad Railways continues to actively develop measures to maintain high standards of customer service. In the course of the project, active consultations were held with the Saudi and Chinese railroad administrations, as well as with the companies involved in transport construction, including road construction in the region. The company is also acquiring its own experience in the process of not yet continuous operation, which nevertheless allows it to respond promptly to changing conditions. From the early days of the project, the main challenges of ongoing infrastructure maintenance were related to sand drifts. Studying the problem of sand drifts made it possible to make important choices. Instead of developing methods to deal with the elements, which may not yield sustainable results, it is advisable to adapt to this natural phenomenon as much as possible and to design, build, and operate the railroad. In this regard, the Etihad Railroad was designed to mitigate the effects of sand on the track infrastructure as much as possible. Various methods were used, ranging from the design of a specific track plan and profile to a special track structure design. Special ditches and sand traps were constructed along the track, and the entire traction locomotive fleet of 7 locomotives on the railroad was equipped with a system of sand trap filters. Sand drifts do not occur along the entire length of the highway, or on a daily basis. Sand drifts are cleared from the track at intervals of once every 7 days, and the equipment used for track cleaning is of a design similar to sand blisters in other countries. The main emphasis is placed on preventive work. Etihad Rail organizes the tracking of sand dunes, so the fight against them begins, before they can block the track. Planting in the railroad right-of-way is also used. The peculiarities of the environment and the dangerous cargo to be transported place special requirements on equipment and rolling stock in particular. The design of the 240 cars built by the Chinese company SCR required certain changes in terms of improving the car sensors and locking mechanisms on the hatches after the delivery of the cars. Problems of a different nature arise in connection with wild animals living in areas of gravity to the mainline. Camels were expected to be a problem, but no one anticipated the difficulties that gazelles would pose for the railroad. The company is working with the UAE Environmental Authority to find a solution. The local population has also become a source of problems in the operation of the railroad. Desert dwellers, who live hundreds of kilometers from cities, for the most part have never seen the railroad, and have no idea of the potential danger it can pose, thus creating the threat of various emergencies. Railroad employees have to visit farms, schools, and citizens' homes to educate them about personal safety rules when they are near the tracks. The remoteness of the mainline facilities from populated areas requires some infrastructure for the workers and employees of the railroad, which is a serious road. With a workforce of about 200 people, private facilities, including schools, are being built through private partnerships to provide adequate facilities for workers and their families, while employees living in Abu Dhabi have to spend a lot of time commuting to their places of work. This policy allows the company, on the one hand, to provide adequate social and living conditions, and, on the other hand, makes it possible to attract investors to these projects, contributing to the development of the region. Despite the recent slowdown in the implementation of some key projects, primarily the second phase of the UAE and Oman network and railroads development, the market for this industry in the Middle East is estimated at $80 billion. This opens up great prospects, both for Etihad Rail and other service providers. For incumbent operators, the relatively small size of the industry means that many manufacturers will still have to organize and deploy supply chains, so far very limited by the lack of infrastructure. Construction of the second phase began in 2020, and will expand the network by 605 kilometers. It is expected that the implementation of the second phase of the project by the end of 2021 will increase the volume of freight traffic from 7 million tons per year to more than 50 million tons. Benefits for the environment. One full-load freight train trip in the first phase can replace about 300 trucks on the road, thereby increasing safety. A fully loaded train produces 70–80% less CO2 emissions than trucks of the same capacity. Rail transport reduces the cost of trade and improves the market position of existing industries, contributing to their growth and leading to economic diversification through the creation of new transportation infrastructure and the associated ecosystem. According to traffic projections, the rail network will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by more than 2.2 million tons per year, equivalent to taking up to 375,000 vehicles off the road. The cost savings on the part of businesses that move freight by rail will allow them to be more commercially successful and contribute more to economic growth. The estimated cumulative benefit of reduced emissions, taking into account trucks, passengers moving from road to rail, is about $7 billion over the next 50 years. Reducing the number of trips per lane will reduce the need for road maintenance, saving $2 billion over the next 50 years. Social benefits. The railroad will connect rural areas to cities, improve connectivity, and create broader economic benefits for these areas. The value of the time saved by reducing road delays by automobile, bus, cab, and freight users who will switch to the railroad network, taking into account station-to-station automobile and railroad time and distance traveled, is equal to about $3 billion over the next 50 years. A huge reduction in traffic accidents as the railroad is used will result in fewer miles traveled on the roads, and therefore fewer accidents per year, saving $6 billion over the next 50 years. Economic benefit. Any freight can often be transported by rail at rates that may be more competitive than other modes of transportation. The railroad is part of the UAE's overall infrastructure development program and will stimulate economic growth in the UAE and support economic diversification. Increased land values around railroad stations will generate rental income for potential residential, commercial and industrial properties, with a potential increased land value of $6 billion over the next 50 years. Benefits to tourism include increased average length of stay, making travel in the region faster, safer and quicker for tourists. And it will also provide them with faster accessibility to tourist attractions, which will result in an accumulation of about $7 billion over the next 5 years. Hamadi, the first Emirati to become a train driver in a country that already has a space program and 2 of the world's largest airlines, but is only now creating a rail network that will connect all 7 Emirates. I was intrigued when I saw the train working, said the 23-year-old man. It was something new, and it prompted me to ask questions about how to learn how to manage it. By connecting the nation's commercial centers, the railroad acts as a catalyst for economic growth. In the near future, cars running on these tracks will carry everything, from consumer goods to perishable food and beverages. Some of the typical products expected to be transported through the Emirates include hay, ceramics, polymers, sugar, metals, waste. The type of wagons used will vary depending on the type of cargo being transported. They include intermodal steel containers, flatbed platforms, low-sided rail gondolas for bulk materials, and temperature-controlled wagons. Will passengers be able to ride on these tracks? In the future, yes. For now, the focus is on expanding freight capacity, but passenger service will be a key part of the project in the coming years. Etihad Rail is working closely with the Federal Transportation Authority and the Emirates Transportation Authorities to develop existing networks and hubs to improve passenger transportation. Eventually, communities across the country will be connected to the neighboring Gulf states, offering a reliable, safer and more efficient, convenient and environmentally friendly way to travel around the region.